So you've probably seen the illustration of taking big rocks and medium rocks and sand and trying to get it into a not so big jar. And you're told that you can put in these things in any order you like, but the goal is to get all of these things into your jar. Okay? And actually, I think there's a little visual aid here. There's the visual aid. It's also going to give you the hint about how you go about getting everything in the jar. You actually have to do it in a certain order. Order is key, and if you don't do it in the order that's prescribed, not everything is going to fit in. Does anybody know that order by chance? Yes, what is it? Oh no, you raised your hand and didn't want to share.
You have to start putting in, you put in some different sized pieces. You don't put them all the same size in at one go. So
Yes.
put some of the larger ones in first.
That's right. That's the order. You must stick the large items in first. In fact, generally speaking, you have to stick the largest item in first. If you do anything but the largest item in, you're toast. Okay? You can kind of get away with it if you have the smaller ones after a while, but if you don't start with the most important things, you get nothing. That is exactly right. And so it's this wonderful picture that we use to describe all sorts of things, like scheduling and doing your finances and how to do business projects you have and how to fit boxes into your car when you don't have much space. You can use this for a lot of different things, but it's also just this poignant picture of what happens when you don't put first things first, and then they don't fit in the end. And you miss out. You miss out on something you're not meant to miss out on. Well, is this a real thing? Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? You think about people who had amazing dreams. Perhaps you know of them. When they were younger, they were telling you, I'm going to do this, and I want to do that. It's the big vision of my life. And now you're like, yeah, you didn't do any of that. And they're like, I can't. Too many things. Too many other things have squished out this one most important thing from my life. And now they're gone. And you see this with people who have lived their whole lives. And it's true of what we believe as well, isn't it? And you run into, let's say, someone who's older. They're now in the retirement years. That's the last little part that they're supposed to enjoy a whole lot because they're going to die and be nothing, someone told them. So they really need to enjoy it, and they start thinking about God. Someone starts telling them, God exists. You should know God soon. And they go, and they look at their whole life, and they look at all the things that they've done, and they say, no, there isn't enough room for this. It doesn't fit. I've seen that over and over again. So if anybody has the idea that they're going to get really, really old and then right on their deathbed and go, oh, Jesus, save me. You know what? There's actually part of us inside of us that says, no, it doesn't fit. It squeezes out of our life with all the things that have come before that we've cherished and loved and thought, this is it. This is what I want. Then we get to the end and we say, no, it just doesn't fit. Well, what about young people, actually? Same thing happens with young people. You have young people have been given this idea that life is basically all about them, which is dangerous and scary. And they're told that, all roads are good, all paths are good, every emotion you feel is absolutely fine because you felt it. And then they hear stories about this man, Jesus, who comes and tells them that what they're doing is wrong. And there's no place for them for that. They say, oh, no, I cherish these things. I cherish this worldview. Everybody's great. All religions lead to the happy place in the sky or whatever it is you decide. And so Jesus doesn't fit. He offends them. And it squeezes out the most important thing that they could possibly have. Well, what does God's word say? God is deeply concerned about the state of your heart when he speaks to you. God is deeply concerned about what's already there, what you cherish, what you value, and whether those things are really the most important thing to you. And if they are, they keep you from hearing what he's really trying to tell you. And our case example is the disciples this morning. Okay? You've got the disciples, and they are as close to Jesus as you can imagine. They're at his feet. They're watching him bringing people to life, walking on the water, making bread from nothing. I mean, this is some stuff here. And yet, for all that they've seen, they've learned nothing about this man. Can you imagine that? We don't think it's possible. It's very possible if your heart's not in the right place. It's very possible. And so what this teaches us is that we must form our world around Jesus. We've got to wrap our life around him. We've got to wrap our being around him and not form Jesus around our world. Just fit him in where he fits with our conceptual framework, our worldview. You fit here, dear. You fit there, Jesus. No, you can't do that with him. He's too big for that. You've got to form your world around Jesus. Not Jesus around your world. Let's consider first how Jesus may be close to you, but you may not be close to him. Okay, Jesus may be close to you, but you may not be close to you. This is such an ironic situation that we have. The disciples have gotten on a boat and they look around and like there's no bread except for this one little loaf. Okay, we're in trouble. Everybody gets a bite. There's no McDonald's. What are we going to do? But not to fear, right? Jesus has done this number before. He's taken loaves twice now and made way too much food. So much food that it's wasteful. At the end, they have to carry it in baskets and try to use it for the next couple of days. Jesus has done this before, and how long ago did he do it? Like a week ago. So a week ago, Jesus fed 2 groups of people so much food from nothing. You would think that they would laugh at this point. Huh? We're out of bread. Okay, Jesus, let's see it. Do the trick. Wow, here comes. This is great. In fact, it sounds like it's a lesson. You know how you teach someone something, right? You don't repeat it once. You repeat it like 6 times until they get it, because we're naive to believe that we could just hear something once and it would change our whole life. We have to hear it over and over and over again, and we have to actually learn it over and over again. So the disciples have learned once that Jesus is capable of feeding a multitude from himself. Now they've learned twice, as he's fed 4,000 people. Now what happens? Jesus provides them with not enough food, and he sees what they're going to do. It's like, what will they do now? And the most crazy thing happens. It's not even on their radar. They don't even think that Jesus is going to provide. In fact, the text indicates they're bickering really over who's going to get the tiny piece of morsel that's left. What? Have you learned nothing about this man? If you look back a corner a little bit here, you'll see that the Pharisees have just come to Jesus, and they come and they test Jesus, and they say, do us a miracle. Show us a sign. And if you were Jesus, you might have looked them in the eye and said, have you not seen anything lately? I've done miracles everywhere you people have gone. You've watched me. I know there have been spies in the audience this whole time. Have you not seen what I've done? The disciples look just like Jesus, or the Pharisees here, right? The disciples are doing the exact same thing that the Pharisees are doing. Show me one more sign. Show me one more sign. I don't believe you'll do it this time. Show me one more thing. They look exactly like the Pharisees, don't they? What has happened? Well, the Pharisees don't believe because the Pharisees already think that they are right. And so no matter what Jesus does, even if he does a sign that they're asking for there, they're not going to believe because they already have a precondition to the way they look at the world. Do you have a precondition to how you look at the world that makes you take all of the data and put it in places that you think bolster your case, and nothing can ever speak outside of that? Nothing can get ever outside of the fact that you think you're right, and everything that happens is just going to be put into the spot that you think it should go, and you're just going to debate it away. Before I met the Lord, I was an atheist, okay, and I thought I was smart. And let me tell you my whole thinking for why I was an atheist. I was like, smart people don't believe in God, and they have lots of good reasons, and I'm smart too. So I assume that there's nothing at all that would prove that God exists. It must be the case that there's no proof at all, and that people who believe that are idiots, just like all my friends who are intelligent tell me. And then somebody would come along and be like, actually, here's some evidence. And I would be like, that's not evidence. And I'd start debating it away. Here's some evidence. Have you ever thought about this? I'd be like, that's not evidence. And I'd just take all of these facts and I would debate myself away from the facts, because the point is, at the end of the day, I wanted to believe what I wanted to believe. And it didn't matter what was there. That's where the disciples are at. Jesus might be close to you, but are you close to Jesus? Jesus might be reaching out to you, but that doesn't mean that you're in his camp. That you belong to him, that's totally different. The moment that you belong to him happens in here, where it goes from facts to a change in your heart. Okay, that's point number one. Form your world around Jesus, not Jesus around your world. And we see that through Jesus, though he may be close to you, you may not be close to him because of your heart, right? Because of the precondition of your heart. Now let's consider how dangerous it is to wrap your heart around something other than Jesus, other than the Savior. Let's go ahead and read verses 13. I'm sorry, that would not be correct. That would be Jesus' word in 15. There you are. Be careful, Jesus warned them. Watch out for the yeast of the Pharisees and that of Herod. They discussed this with one another and said, is it because we have no bread? All right. So Jesus gives out this warning, and he mentions two teachings, okay? The first is the teachings of Herod and the teachings of the Pharisees, or their worldview. What they believe is how the world works. Be careful of that. And we know that's the case, not because it says it's their teachings here, but because elsewhere in the Gospels it mentions that it is their teaching specifically that Jesus is going after. So if you want to know what's going on, that's what he's talking about. And he calls these teachings yeast or leaven. Okay, so let's talk about these because they're very different worldviews that the Pharisees and Herod have. So the Pharisees first, they reject Jesus because they already think of themselves as on the right path. Okay, they believe if they do good things, and they certainly think that they're good people, and they certainly think they do good things. If I do good things, they say, everything will have to end up okay at the end. I'm going to bring out my big, huge resume before God and say, look at all the stuff I did, and God's going to have to accept me. And then along comes Jesus, and not only does Jesus not buy any of that, he starts to say, are you really doing what's good when your heart isn't actually in a good place at all? Are you really following the Lord when you're just doing this for show? Are you really doing these things from a pure heart? I don't think so, Pharisees. And they're furious about it. And he starts to just chink away at their righteousness, and they're more and more upset. But you see, they cannot put their trust in Jesus, while Jesus is telling them that their viewpoint is wrong. That they already think they're righteous. They don't need Jesus because Jesus tells them that they're not righteous. Now, have you noticed this is actually the prevailing theory on the streets? Most people haven't thought about heaven. I don't know how you get away with not thinking about that. That's pretty important. But what do they think is going to happen? Well, I'm a good person. I've done lots of good things. I mean, just yesterday I, helped an old lady across the street. I'm good. Right? I know that I'll pass the test. I'm aware that I'm going to make it for sure. And then when you talk about Jesus who dies for sins, what's the reaction? It's like visceral. Ugh, I don't like that. That's unpalatable to my taste. I'm fine. Nobody asked you to save me. You see why they can't like Jesus? He demonstrates the lie of their righteousness. Herod, he's the opposite. Herod just wants to have fun. Everything he does is about living for himself and enjoying the good life. And he's very impure, right? And lest we think that that's Herod and our society is different, we should notice Mr. Harvey Weinstein and then what happened afterwards. All of the people in our government quaked in fear because many of them have done the very same things that this man has done. It's rampant. this lifestyle of living for me and not caring about the people that you hurt. Not even treating them as human. This is the way this man lives. And then Jesus comes along, and what's their problem with Jesus? It's that he's going to ruin the fun. If I really listen to this man, if I believe that what he says is true, he is going to impinge upon all the enjoyment of my life, and I'll be stuck. That's what he thinks. And that's exactly what happened with John the Baptist. And he was frightened of John the Baptist. He enjoyed listening to him, but he hated the way that John the Baptist actually said, what you think is fun is toxic. And it's hurting you. And that's not what you're to spend your life on. Well, that is actually also our society, isn't it? We're very much in love with this. Just turn on the TV. I mean, it's actually, if you think about the things that you watch during a normal course of watching TV, and then at the end you say, what morals did they contribute to my life? And what did they tell me to value in my life? That's a really interesting experience. I advise you to watch exactly 1 hour of TV just so you can see all the lies that are being pushed on you. All the things that are garbage that the world tells you is true, and most of it amounts to, I hope you have as much fun as possible. Now get this. Those are terrible, evil viewpoints on life. But you know what? The disciples, they believe these things, hook, line, and sinker, right along with Herod and right along with the Pharisees. They're right there saying, yeah, that's true. Now, how do I know that? Well, what did the disciples argue about? What do the disciples argue about? What's their constant quibble? Who's the greatest? Right? Here they go. They're going to debate away who's the greatest. Well, what's that about? Well, part one, they're saying that I'm more righteous than you. That sounds like they're trying to earn their way to heaven. What does that sound like? The Pharisees. And part two, they're like, I'm the greatest. It's all about pride. What does that sound like? Herod. See, even though they're sitting next to Jesus, they're buying the stuff that these guys are selling. And that's why they have no clue who Jesus is. That's why they don't understand. And so Jesus looks at them, and he doesn't warn them idly. And the text indicates that the actual verb indicates that this is not the first time they've heard this. And he says to them, beware of the leaven of these two people. Beware of their viewpoint. He calls it leaven. Well, let's talk about that. If you take leaven, we have this next, hopefully, yes, there it is. This is unleavened bread on the right. Matzos, it's really tasty. This is also tasty. This is actually more tasty usually. This is challah. Okay, the difference between these two is that one of them has a little bit of leaven in them. Okay, this one on the right. So someone takes the leaven and they put it in the dough. It's a little itty bitty thing, and it puffs up the whole dough and infects every inch of the dough you see. It fills the entire consistency of it, so every part has leaven in it. I'll give you a different illustration to help. Household water tanks. Okay, so in giant buildings, if you have running water there, on those top floors, the way they get the running water there is that somewhere above you, there is a giant water tank, okay? And that water tank is there because they cannot pump the water all the way up through the system, so they got to bring it down. So, very typical in New York where you have all these sky rises to see all these water tanks everywhere. And that's wonderful, and they're beautiful. But actually, all that water in one place is a wonderful thing as long as it doesn't get tainted. But if you even drop the smallest amount of sludge or feces or something, it's going to taint every cubic inch of that water. It will fill every little bit. So, if you take a Jolly Rancher, let's say you take a Jolly Rancher and you drop it into a thing of water and you say, that Jolly Rancher is poop, right? It's just a little bit of poop. It's just itty bitty. Do you want to drink that now? No, right? Because it infects the whole thing. Now, here's the thing. Sin, but particularly viewpoints like the ones the Pharisees and Herod give off, worldviews, they're not innocent. They infect your entire personality. They infect your entire heart. They take over. You don't think it's the case, and you can't feel it. But it can take over everything. And so we have this interesting note about sin. Leaven, it takes over these ideas. So if you think that I can just live for myself, that it's all about me, because that's what the world says, now I'm going to take that under, I'm going to believe that, guess what? it's infected you. And it infects everything that you do. And I find that's true, don't you? I mean, I claim to be the servant of the Lord. I do so many selfish things all the time. Because at the end of the day, even though I say I belong to Jesus, I think, now it's me time. God wants to change our mind. Now, here's something, the secondary thing about leaven. So, in Jewish tradition from the Bible, twice a year, Passover, and then also the Feast of Unleavened Bread. First the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and then Passover is shortly thereafter. You have to rid your house of all of the leaven. Get rid of it all, okay? And what happens is there's a search. You got to beware of the leaven. And you go through the house and you make sure that there's nothing but crackers. You can't have any bread, you can't have any toast, all these things. You take all of it, and what normally happens is they just get rid of it. When we did Passover, we actually put it in a little bag and just put it down the stairs, okay? But you're supposed to get it as far away from you as you can. And it's a picture of sanctification, you see. You're to be rigorous with yourself about lies. You're to be rigorous because that stuff grows. That stuff gets bigger. That stuff becomes a beast in your life. So you get rid of it. You remove it from your life. And then when Jesus says, beware of the leaven, that would remind them of this particular Passover thing. And be like, oh, I don't want any leaven because I can't celebrate with God, because I can't honor him if I have this in my life. And this is what Jesus wants to do at your head level. He wants his truth to be the gatekeeper for what you think. And to be rigorous about lies. Don't let them stay. They'll hurt you. Okay? So, form your world around Jesus, not Jesus around your world. Because first, Jesus may be close to you. You may not be close to him. Because second, it's dangerous to wrap your heart around something else. And lastly, loving the world more than you love Jesus leaves us in a terrible way. It leaves us in a bad, bad state. So Jesus, having heard this whole debacle, is really very hurt. And he then gives out 7 questions in rapid fire, okay? And they're really just indictments. When he says, is this the case? Everything that Jesus says is actually, this is the case. Your heart's hard, things are not good. Let's just read it, verse 17 here. Aware of this discussion, Jesus asked them, why are you talking about having no bread? Do you still not see or understand? Are your hearts hardened? Do you have eyes but fail to see, and ears but fail to hear? And don't you remember? Seeing an unhoped for truth doesn't change us. It makes us more callous. Seeing what we do not wish to see doesn't change our mind about what truth is. It gives us a moment to put up a wall and say, that didn't happen. I didn't see it. I mean, imagine if you live your life for yourself and then Jesus starts doing he's show-stopping on you. And you're like, the show is about me, Jesus. And you can just see Jesus doing his amazing stuff. You just kind of turn away, pretend like it's not happening, pretend like he's not so important, pretend like you don't care. And pretty soon, you're no longer even listening to the Jesus show. You've entirely checked out. And when someone says, Jesus is your Messiah, he died for you, he loves you, you're like, I don't want any love. I don't want to. No, that's not who I am. I'm fine on my own. We become callous to the truth rather than listening to it. There's a great question to ask yourself. What things does Jesus want to tell me that I'm totally and utterly calloused to? And I will not listen to him. Because it happens because the truth interacts with our lie and we hold on to our lie. And that's what's going on here. Humans can engage in purposeful delusion for our fragile opinions. I want this so bad. And it makes us look foolish. And if you notice Jesus, it really is sad what he has to do. He's like, so let's have an object lesson here. How many loaves did I start with? And they're like, this many loaves. And he's like, and how many did we get at the end? Basket loaves, right? And I did this twice. What was the second time? And how many then? basket loads. It's like they're children. It's like they have no education. Jesus says, you guys are hard as a rock to my truth. It's like a rubber ball bouncing off a wall. That's like how truth is for you. Doesn't go in, doesn't make you wise, it just bounces off and goes somewhere and does nothing. Now, Jesus says you have ears, you have eyes, you have thoughts, but none of them seem to work. Do you have eyes? Do you not see? Do you have ears? Do you not hear? He's saying that actually even your senses are not fit for purpose because you use them to justify your own opinion. That's the issue, isn't it? And so we have this really interesting thing. You're missing out on the truth. You look like outsiders. Jesus has just said previously that the crowd, even though they're hearing, it's not really going in. Even though they're seeing, they're not taking it in. And now he said that of the disciples. So that the disciples are on the same level at this point as a total outsider who hasn't spent any time with Jesus. And the answer and the reason for why they're there is their own stuff that they've already put in that's not allowing the rock of Christ to enter their jar. Okay? That's what's going on here. And so we mustn't drag Jesus down to our level. We mustn't try to squish him into our paradigm. We mustn't say, Jesus, you belong here next to all of the other things that I'm going to accomplish in my life. Because those things are more important than me, than you are to me. And I've just got you a nice spot. Isn't that nice? And Jesus says, that's not nice at all. I don't want that. I'll give you an illustration. People who are Christians are those who confess that Jesus Christ is, who knows? What? Jesus Christ is?
Lord.
Lord. Well, what does that mean? Lord means you are my final authority on everything. It's really quite extreme, isn't it? If you say that somebody is Lord, that means at any point in time, they get to tell you what to do. At any point in time, they get to tell you where to go. We're giving actually our whole lives over to Jesus, and we become his servants. Well, you would think that Jesus might say, anybody who wants to think about coming after me, just like me a little bit more and I'll be your friend too. Come to me, all you who are weary, and enjoy my presence, and hopefully we can become good friends. That's not what he says. He says, give me everything. He says, if anyone doesn't follow me, take up his cross daily and come after me as a dead man, as someone who's not going to live, given dead to themselves and alive to Christ. If anyone does that, then they can be my disciple. Otherwise, nobody. That's what he says. It's really quite shocking. But that's what's required, actually. Because we're all thinking the wrong way about things, and then Jesus comes along with the right way, and if we don't give him our whole lives when that wrong way interacts with his right way, well, it just bounces off. And we say, well, God is right on these things, but not this, not this other thing. And by the way, I'm not really living for him. I'll give you an illustration of how Jesus wants us to think about this. Marriage. It's so good to be married. Let me tell you, when I was not married, I just did whatever I want 100% of the time. Now, some of you guys want to go back to that. Shame on you for that. All right? But that's what I wanted to do. If I wanted to get up in the middle of the night and go to the store and have 3 cheeseburgers, which is a normal routine for me, that's what I was going to do. I was going to get in my car and have all that junk food and then go back home and then wake up at 12:30 in the afternoon, right, and have done nothing with my life. That's fine. I was alone. This is what was good for me, quote unquote, right? But actually, once I've gotten now married, the funniest thing happens. A situation comes along, and I actually think about somebody besides myself. Okay, I'm like, wait a minute. All right, so what would I do? Okay, I know what I would do. All right, now, what would my wife think? And then I begin to think about, actually, a whole bunch of good things, because there's a whole list of things that aren't even on my radar. Never have been on my radar. Like, I've never, ever really watched out for anything or been afraid of anything. I used to do all these stupid, risky things just because it'd be fun. And at the time, my mother would be like, I would tell her, like, the things I was doing, and she would lose her mind with fear. And I was like, no, it was fine. I was good. It was good. But now I think, well, wait, what would my wife think of this? How does she feel? And you know what happens often enough? I say, I should actually care about how she feels, and I do something else. You see, the truth of my priorities has now changed my behavior, hasn't it? Well, this is what Jesus wants in our thinking, you see, even more so. He comes first, and the gatekeeper for what we even allow ourselves to think is what is pleasing to him. And we let it filter. Some people say, you have no filter between what you think and what you say. This is even deeper. You have no filter for what you allow to bounce around in your head and think is truth. And you ought to have that filter stop and examined against Christ and his love for you. And then let it change you. Let it change you. But you know what stops that? What stops that is us thinking we're right, we have truth, we know the path, and maybe Jesus can help us and throw it in there. Because what actually happens is that sense of rightness comes and chokes out Jesus' word in us. So we don't want that. Well, that's our message. We must form our world around Jesus. We mustn't form Jesus around our world. And now we can see why, right? Because, well, Jesus may be close to us, but that doesn't mean we're close to him. Our hearts have to be right. Because it's so dangerous to fall in love and to give ourselves to something that isn't Christ. And because the state that leaves us in is sad and lamentable. Now let's talk about conclusions. What shall we do with this message? Let me give you a couple takeaways. First, the takeaway is for someone who doesn't believe in Jesus at this point. I want to encourage you to keep wrestling with that. I want to encourage you not to sell yourself short, not even to make a bargain with Jesus where you give him 20%. Isn't that great, Jesus? No thanks, Jesus says. That's not what I want. I want it all. But keep wrestling with that. Keep struggling with him. Struggle with Jesus until you're willing to give him your whole life. Until you're willing to let him be your Lord. And if you're ready, well, come to me. Let's pray, and I'll introduce you to my Savior. He's a great and wonderful God, okay? Or a number of other people would love to pray with you, love to talk about meeting Jesus Christ. But keep struggling with him. Don't go and sell yourself short and say, I just believe in Jesus for these things, but I don't really trust him with my whole life. Secondly, singular issues that Christians have that they disagree with God on, okay? So it's very unpopular to be a Christian in today's society. Can we just admit that, okay? It's out there. And people look at us and they really go way over the top in bashing us, okay? They just go crazy and say they do this and that and the other thing. And some of what they say has validity to it. And I don't want to dismiss that. But quite a bit of what they say is like just worldly thoughts. Here's some worldly thoughts, and it's against the gospel, and we go along with that. Yeah, I agree with that. I'm not that sort of Christian. And in our hearts, we have this issue that we disagree with God on, and it goes on for years and years and years and years. Years of disagreeing with God on some huge issue in your life. And God may be calling you this morning to simply say, I just disagree with myself because I have a higher authority. I don't get it. I don't even particularly like it. But Jesus is right. I want to give you a moment to pray about that in a second. Let me give you one more idea. How do we do this every day? The Bible says to take every thought captive and to deliver it through the lens of Jesus, through the lens of what's true. Let me give you one practical way to do this. As you're thinking about things, remember that nobody can see your thoughts, and that's a really good thing. But Jesus can. And what you ought to think as you go through life is, could I have this conversation that I'm having in my head that nobody sees if Jesus was invited into this? If Jesus were to sit there and say, oh, yeah, so that's what you're thinking. Could I continue the conversation, or would I be like, I'm so sorry you were here for this? He can't go away. Introduce the right kind of thinking. There's a verse that says, whatever is true, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good reputation, if there's anything noble, if there's anything worthy, think of these things. What are we filling our brains with? All sorts of things that don't belong there. But put Christ first and let him trickle down through your thoughts. So I'd like you to, and we're going to pray, and I want to give you a moment to pray about one of those three things or something else if you find something else that's really